Well, they have been sounding alarm for quite a while now about the imminent invasion since at least November. And that seems to be kind of repeating the pattern. So the invasion still haven't happened. And, there are kind of growing concerns about, kind of where does this intelligence come from and how reliable it is, to be honest. But there is a kind of a broader framework also that, so far as the Russia is concerned, there are certainly kind of issues they highlighted, and the build-up of forces are quite real on the border. But it's still unclear what invasion itself might possibly achieve for Russia, insofar as its strategic goals of keeping Ukraine neutral, stopping eastward expansion of NATO, and achieving some kind of reboot of the European security architecture, which they were not happy about since the Cold War, how the invasion of Ukraine actually would achieve, and Russia would be in a weaker position afterwards.
Moscow feels like its main concern, the potential for Ukraine to join NATO, has not been addressed by the US and NATO. How can negotiations move forward if the US says this bit is non-negotiable?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The Russian demand seems to be kind of designed to be rejected in the first place. But nevertheless, what's interesting about it is that they keep talking. So there's been a meeting in Geneva with the deputy foreign ministers. Then there was a meeting with the foreign secretary and the Russian foreign minister. They were exchanging letters with each other, but they haven't broken off talks yet. So if there was nothing to talk about, they would not be continuing some form of discussion. So there is a public stance, both from Russia and the United States, but at the same time, there is also obviously things being said behind closed doors, which we don't know about. But I think if there was no room for progress whatsoever, I don't think there would be any further talk. So I think there is some optimism, although looking at the tensions and the rhetoric coming in from Washington and Moscow, I think we still have quite a lot of escalation to expect before there is any kind of solution through the talks. But I'm still quite hopeful that the talks will achieve something.
Well, there are differing views even within the NATO alliance over Russia, with Germany and France at odds with the rest.
Yes, that's right. I think you have to look carefully at different priorities for different countries. The countries which were sounding alarm most were the United States and the United Kingdom. United States in particular have much less economic links with Russia. Europe, particularly Germany, less so France, they're quite kind of closely interlinked, particularly in the energy field with Russia. So European Union as a whole gets about 40% of its natural gas supplies from Russia. And of course, any sanctions which might endanger that supply, and the talk of sanctions kind of cutting Russia financially from the rest of the world, will have repercussions for the European energy security. Because if Russia, they can't pay Russia for the gas, that Russia will still supply gas, or it might even retaliate on its own accord. So it's very kind of much more difficult for Germany and France to kind of go all out hostile sanctions to Russia than it is for the United States, and there is kind of a problem therein.
Tell us a bit more about the potential impacts on the energy supply and how countries such as Australia can step in here to possibly alleviate shortages.
Well, I think there's been kind of crisis talks and talks about how they can replace Russian gas supply if it happens. So of course, Australia in many ways very similar to Russia in its kind of structure of its economy. It's a very large producer of coal and natural gas. But so far as I could see, it's actually very hard to do it. If you take away so much gas out of the market, you will have a huge increase in prices worldwide. Right, so because Europe is already paying one of the highest prices for natural gas in its history, not least because there's a lot of gas supplies been going to liquefied natural gas going to East Asia, for example, China and Japan in particular. So there isn't actually that much spare capacity. Plus, there is infrastructure issues that a lot of gas actually supplied from pipelines rather than liquefied natural gas, and pipelines can be replaced overnight, right? So it's very difficult. Also, the issue of oil as well. Russia is the second largest supplier of oil in the world, producer of oil. Again, oil is a 7 years high. If Russia is reducing supplies of oil, there'll be basically a kind of a huge energy crisis across the board. Gas in particular for Europe, that will be immediate. But worldwide, you also will see a spike in energy supplies. At the time when you have kind of worries about inflation, about economic recovery, interest rates and so forth, so it won't be pretty for anyone, to be honest. It will be hard on Russia, of course, but I don't think it will be kind of easy for the rest, because basically the dilemma here is that Russia has a weaker economy, but all the sanctions, which are relatively harm-free for the imposing side, the West, have already been imposed since 2014. So with any further real sanctions imposing will also affect the West very adversely, particularly Europe. And that really is the difficulty there.
Ripple effects felt around the world. Alexander Titov, thanks so much.
Thank you.